Whatever the facts turn out to be, there's enough cooperation there between North Korea, Syria, and Iran that these countries really do form an axis of evil, not in some metaphorical sense, but in a very concrete, very operational way. So taking North Korea off the list of state sponsors of terrorism means it's okay to provide assistance in ballistic missiles and weapons of mass destruction to two other countries that are prominent on the list of state sponsors of terrorism. What kind of signal does it send in the Middle East and beyond to say, well, it's okay for North Korea to build a nuclear facility with Syria in the middle of the Syrian desert, a state sponsor of terror, and to supply ballistic missiles to both Syria and Iran? I think that in the misguided effort to resolve the North Korean nuclear program, that we're about to undertake a decision that will have profoundly negative impact, not only with respect to North Korea and Japan, but in well. All of this is the stuff that makes the potential for Security Council meetings on a subsequent use of military force against Iran's nuclear weapons program so important, so that as this plays out in the context of the September 6th Israeli raid on the Syrian facility, keep in mind the larger implications if and when the United States or Israel uses military force against Iran's program. That's why the relationship between the U.S. and Israel in the UN is so important, because if that day happens, and if it does come before the Security Council, you can bet that there are going to be a couple of lonely countries across the street as we listen to the world's complaints. But one thing will be certain if that day comes, we will be in a safer world without an Iranian or a Syrian nuclear weapons program. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Ambassador Bolton will take a few questions. If you'd like to ask a question, we have microphones. He only has a few minutes, but please wait until you get the microphones. Where are they? I'm waiting for them. Well, go ahead. Okay, you have to be very loud, and please introduce yourself.
Yeah. Well, you know, at least some networks do still cover the UN. Since I'm a Fox News contributor, I mean, I'm just here in the advertising business today, especially on my own book, which I hope you all enjoy. But but I have to say, you know, it is a fact that a lot of what goes on at the UN runs under the radar screen of public attention, and in a way, that's I think perfectly rational, because a lot of what goes on across the street doesn't make the slightest bit of difference and isn't worth considering. On the other hand, much that does is like I've described it before as the growing of a coral reef. It may grow slowly, but it accretes over time and eventually can become a real problem. That's why this record of resolutions in the Human Rights Commission and now the Human Rights Council against Israel is so important. So that, and this replicates itself in fields that affect not only foreign policy, but that increasingly affect American domestic policy as well. I'll give you an example. You know, in this country, we have people who believe in the death penalty and people who don't believe in the death penalty. And I'm sure this room is filled with people on both sides of that debate. But we're a democracy, and we decide at the state level, at the federal level, whether we're going to have a death penalty. Last week, the UN General Assembly overwhelmingly voted a resolution calling for a moratorium on the death penalty. Now, personally, I favor the death penalty. I don't think that's really the issue. It's not whether you're for or against the death penalty. It's what, in God's name, does the General Assembly have a role in discussing an issue that we resolve democratically? This is a domestic issue for the United States. If other countries want to abolish the death penalty, it's their perfect right to do so. If we decide in the exercise of our constitutional freedom we're going to have a death penalty, that's our right to do so. So here's a resolution. This was widely covered in Europe, where it was regarded as a big victory for our friends and allies in the European Union. It got almost no coverage in this country because most people just don't care about it. But it's just one more little thing on the coral reef of UN influence that grows over time that we need to be mindful of. Are the microphones here?
I've got a mic here if I can use it.
Well, there's...
Ask the microphone.
Anne?
But I tell you what, sir, I'll call you second, but let's let the person with the microphone go first, and then you'll get a microphone, if that's all right.
All right. It's David Matus. I just wanted to follow up on your comment on disproportionality, and I certainly agree with what you say, and I wanted to add as well that legally there's no foundation for the criticisms of disproportionality, that the standard of disproportionality is not found in any of the international legal instruments. It's not in the Geneva Conventions of the Law of War or any of the protocols. The closest is the standard of excessive response in relation to the direct military advantage anticipated, which is a very different standard. And so all this criticism of disproportionality is not only factually hokum, as you've indicated, it's also legally hokum as well. I just wanted to add that. Thanks.
Well, I think that's an important point. I tell you, I go a lot farther than other people do, maybe even farther than Ann does on the subject of international law, because I think most of it is simply imaginary. And this is something that people spend a lot of time doing at the UN with the decisions of various bodies, considering these decisions to have the effect of law, which once again most Americans ignore. The thing that confounds me about how this happens is the way even the UN's strongest supporters tend to overlook what happens when the supposedly sacrosanct orders of the UN are not carried out. Let me give you one important example. The Security Council has now passed 3 resolutions under Chapter 7 of the Charter calling on Iran to suspend its uranium enrichment program. Now, the international lawyers will tell you that acting under Chapter 7, the decisions of the Security Council are mandatory on all UN members. So that means Iran is now under 3 mandates by the Security Council to give up its uranium enrichment program. They have about as much intention of giving up that program as I do of flying back to Washington in a few minutes, myself, without aid of an airplane. Do you think anybody, any of the UN's strongest supporters, criticize Iran for failing to heed, I mean, this really international law mandatory resolution? They act like it's only an incidental concern. This is part of the fundamental hypocrisy of what goes on at the UN under the guise of international law that we need to challenge more frequently. Now, sir, you've been patient, and here's your microphone.
Mr. Ambassador, after you served in the United Nations on the recess appointment for 6 or 8 months.
16 months, but who's counting?
But I'm saying after 6 or 8 months.
Right.
And it was apparent that you're doing a great job for the United States and were a very effective advocate for Israel. I want to know, sir, if you had occasion to speak directly or indirectly Coleman to support you for a permanent appointment. Did you have occasion to speak to Schumer and Feinstein, who may not be halakhically Jewish, but Cole and Wisconsin, Feingold and all?
Yeah. Well, I'm no expert on that subject, but I did.
I might add, sir, I wrote to Schumer and Clinton. I never got a response.
Well, thank you for writing. In any event, you know, I thank you for your support. I really do. I think that if whether in 2005 or in 2006 I had been able to get a vote on the Senate floor, I would have been confirmed. Senator Biden once told me, and this is all in the book if you want the gory details, but Senator Biden once said if I got to the floor I'd have 53 or 54 votes. He didn't know of some Democrats that I had who would have voted for me.